Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show. What a pleasure it is to have you here. And I am so anticipatory about this conversation. I cannot wait.
I'm happy to talk and happy to finally connect.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I know. I've followed you for a long time now, years, I would say, and I know we've spoke back and forth a few times. And so this topic, which we're about to get into, is not only is it a requested one, but I think it is something that people are just they want to know more about, and they also, if they don't know, they need to know, and they should know for a multitude of reasons. So before we get into everything, just in case people don't know who you are and sort of what you're about, give us a little bit of a background on you and why which is why you're so passionate about health and well-being and all the things.
So I'm Matt, and I'm the owner of Cultivate Elevate, and the company was started back in 2020. And the whole point of the company is to provide solutions and not fear. When I had a lot of health ailments and all types of health ailments that I had, I couldn't figure it out. I would talk to the professionals. They would tell me it's genetic. They would tell me I'm getting older. They tell me all these things. And I started to realize that it was basically what I was putting into my body, what I was eating, what I was drinking, what was in my terrain, things like Wi-Fi and all the dangers that come with those things as well. But, a lot of the stuff impacted my health. And when I started to realize it, I started to realize we can fix everything very easy. There is a counter towards everything, and we're just told that a lot of times we can't heal and this, we can't do this and we can't do that. But in reality, we're self-regenerating beings. And when we're provided with the right nutrients and we clean up our terrain, our body begins to heal like that. So the whole point of Cultivate Elevate is to provide solutions to empower people with knowledge and also to help clean up their terrain and clean up their diet and bring in all these beautiful different superfoods and things like electroculture to help grow more food, but just all different things to just help elevate. We have all this crazy chaos going on all the time, and that gets old. That got real old for me in 2020, that's for sure. And then so I decided there needs to be solutions to everything, and then that's where it's kind of gone from here.
I love it. Well, here's the thing is that I think it's just that people don't have the awareness that there are solutions. And I talk about that here on the show all the time is that, which is the reason why we're sitting here, right? It's like if people knew the different perspectives, if people knew that there were real solutions and that what's being told to them or what they've grown up listening to or hearing, that's not necessarily the whole story, you know? And so it's people like yourself who are making just a world of a difference with all of the stuff that you put out there. This is the kind of stuff people need to know, and people like you, we need more voices like this. So it's really an honor to have you. I'm super excited.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I'm happy to talk about any topic you want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get heavy into geoengineering and chemtrails, and then it might go. You don't know. We'll just kind of see where it goes from there. But for those who, let's just get right into it. For those who are a little unfamiliar with geoengineering, with quote unquote chemtrails, let's kind of do like a foundational 101 so that we can set it up for people and go then into more details. So basically, what is it? What are chemtrails? What are they doing? What are they spraying and so forth? And we'll just kind of take it from there.
So to get into this, there's a great documentary called Frankenskies, and I highly recommend everybody look into that documentary so you can go into the past of all the way back to 1910 when they started modifying our weather. So our weather has been modified for a long period of time. During acts of war, they would actually modify the weather. They would create storms and try to flood people out. That was what was happening in Vietnam. During World War II, they were spraying stuff into the sky to basically try to block out the enemy so that the airplanes wouldn't be able to see each other. Now, what's happening in the present day 2023 is we have weather modification taking place in our beautiful skies every single day. So, what you'll do is you'll look up into the sky and you'll see all these straight lines and you'll see all these airplanes. And what they'll do is they'll go in there and they'll draw all these straight lines into the sky. And then what happens is there's a sound based technology on the ground, which sends up a frequency, which can look like a cell phone tower, sends up to those chemicals up in the sky, and then it'll turn into a cloud. And then sooner or later, you'll start to see it maybe turn into a rain cloud, or it'll begin to storm, or it'll begin to rain, or whatever other weather altercation will start to happen. But weather modification has taken place for a very long period of time. Now, what they will try to tell you is that this is contrails. This is not what it seems, but you can look into the skies and kind of go with your own instinct and kind of see what's going on with your weather. For example, here in Arizona, we're supposed to have 350 days of sunshine. Now we have about 250 days of sunshine. So there's a quite big difference happening with our weather. And the only difference is when you look into the skies, I can tell you when it's going to be cloudy, and I can tell you when a monsoon is coming. And now I can tell you, like as of today, when winter is coming. And that's what we're kind of going through right now. Normally it's about 80 here in Scottsdale in the wintertime. Now it's about 54 degrees. So there's these big changes taking place. And a simple example is something you can look at, like for example in Maine last week, they had all this flooding going on. They're not having snow, they're having water instead. Because what's happening is there's all these fluctuations of the natural climates. They can modify all these different areas and change things. And they can do things with storms, they can do things with hurricanes, with anything you can pretty much think of, because it is the weather. There's a document called the NASA War Document, Owning the Weather by 2025. It's a document everybody should look into. There's also the Weather Modification Act of 1976 and the Weather Modification Act of 1979. It shows all the three-letter agencies which are taking place in modifying our weather in order to save us from the sun. That's actually the funniest part of it all, is they're trying to block out the sun to save the planet. But then if you think about it, if you modify the weather over here, what happens over here? And that's why, for example, when a storm comes in a certain area, it'll then affect another place. So I'll see a storm brewing here in Arizona. I'll go and film it and show all the planes come out and all the things. And then all of a sudden they'll say winter storm advisory coming to Colorado and the East Coast. And you can just see it happen like clockwork. And the reason I say this is because we don't have puffy, beautiful clouds like I learned about in third grade anymore. We just have these straight lines and this weird, like paintbrush. It looks almost just like a paintbrush, smeared everything. And then it just becomes this collage in the sky, and then it becomes a storm. But, when it comes to what they're putting up there, the White House admitted that they wanted to put sulfur dioxide and all these other chemicals up in the sky to reflect the sun and block the sun, even though they did say that sulfur dioxide could lead to respiratory issues in about 30% of the population. So, when you get into all of this, you start to go, how does any of this make any sense? Why is any of this being funded? And why is any of this being done? And it was only done in acts of war before the 1950s, but now it's taking place all across the world. And there's a website, geoengineering map.org, where you can see all the weather engineering projects which are taking place across the world now. And so this is why when you go outside and you're having weird weather and things seem off and you have all these fogs and hazes and all types of weird stuff going on, this is where it connects the dots.
I like the fact that you mentioned that it was an act of war prior to the 1950s, because if we really think about it, if we want to get real down and dirty with the truth right now, I believe that's what's actually happening now. It's just very covert, right? Like we really is sort of this weird act of something, because I feel like in a way it's like war but on the people. And and also you mentioned the documents, like the owning the weather. That is a public document that you could easily look up. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I mean, it's just, I think you can look it up under the White House.org or whatnot. These things are in plain sight in terms of looking up. It's just that I think people just assume that this stuff is conspiracy and blah, 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 and that there was no such thing as patents back in the early 1900s. And it's just hearsay. But the reality is that it's so right in front of our face, it's not even a secret.
Well, and I like that you said that because, with this whole green movement moving to solar panels, if we block out the sun, how are we going to have any energy?
Right.
Because the solar panels aren't going to work, and then if you're modifying the weather, then the wind panels don't make a lot of sense either too, like it doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at that. But yes, when you look at this, all of this stuff is out there. It's all been presented in front of everybody. And the Weather Modification Act of 1976 was actually put in place because so many people were messing with the weather during the 1970s that it started snowing in Miami. And people started freaking out. They were like, wait, it's what? It's 21 degrees in Miami. There was also another snowstorm, which was so crazy in Wyoming that it completely whited out the whole city and they had to shut the city down because of all of this messing with the climate. Let's just see what we do over here, and maybe we can make it rain over here. And there's another website, weathermodification.com, which you can actually go on and you can list and enlist your airplane, sign it up, and they will teach you how to start spraying the skies and modifying the weather by you. So there's so much of this, and you start to sit there and go, well, then what's real and what's fake? What am I actually living in? Am I living in some weird simulation where you're modifying the weather? And then when you tie it back, like for example, here in Arizona, the energy companies fund these projects. The city council funds these projects. They call it cloud seeding and making precipitation and things like that. And it's like, why are you messing with the weather now? Isn't that going to cause issues and these things? And you start to follow back and see all these things, and you start to connect the dots and go, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And if you're manipulating our ionosphere, which is what they're doing, and then playing all these games, there can be detrimental results. And with all the hurricanes, especially the one that hit California, I actually showed all the patents of hurricane steering. If you go to Google, you can look up all the hurricane steering, hurricane modification. They run airplanes through it, and they can manipulate the hurricane. But before that one hit California, I put up a video. It hit 1.2 million views. And it was interesting because Yahoo News tried to debunk all of it. But we showed, or I showed in the video, all the patents, all the research, every single thing. And it's like, how is all that fake? This is from the government. It's not even from, I'm not just making it up. It's straight off the .gov website. So you sit there and go, okay, how many things are actually real, or how many events are created to take out insurance policies and make
Mhm.
money off the people, or manipulate the weather so that people move from certain places? Because that's the other thing. When they do certain stuff with this, they can make people move out of certain places. Like we just saw in California with those big waves. If big waves are coming in, people go, maybe I shouldn't live here anymore. So
Mhm.
you start to see that the weather itself can be used as an act of war to make people move, or to pull out insurance policies and do a whole bunch of other things.
You just pretty much answered the question that I was going to come at you with, which is, I mean, we've already been talking about it, but there are so many people that are going. They have this rebuttal of they're doing it for our good, like it's because of climate change and this whole, the green new deal and the this and the that. But when you really start to unravel the details, it's clearly not that. But how does one approach? Because I know that there are people listening here that are like, I've been trying to tell my friends, family, colleagues, whatever, that this is not normal. And they come back with, no, it's because our climate is changing. So they have to come in and step in and do something. This is our fault. What would you say to that?
So the Weather Modification Act of 1979, if you open up that document, and I think you go to page 4, you can see the people who are entailed, who are actually changing our weather: the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and Department of Agriculture. All the people who are supposed to be saving us. That's what we're talking about. Those are the people who are supposed to be saving us and pushing that we need to move to these new things and everything else. But they're the ones modifying the weather. And then, if you look at the documentary Frankenskies and you sit down and watch that whole documentary, you kind of start to piece together these things. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to just follow the money. That's what
Yeah.
I've learned with all of this. Everything of what I'm talking about, just follow the money, and start to see why these projects are funded. And here's the other thing. Why are these patents allowed to be, published on the internet and also approved? They're weather modification patents. You've got to sit there and think, why is this allowed to be approved? Shouldn't this be denied? Shouldn't it be national security, or something of what they would say, so that this isn't allowed? But if me and you talk about a plant that will heal somebody, that will not get approved. But this weather modification patent will get approved. So you have all this different stuff. And then when we talk about the climate is changing, well, we see who's changing it. We see the agencies who are involved in this. We see the city councils. We see all of this, and it's all documented. You can go on these websites and it'll say, like, for example, snowfall augmentation taking place in California by the Sequoia rainforest since 1951. Why have you been augmenting the weather since 1951? Well, you just decided what was wrong with it before. The sequoia trees are beautiful. All of that area is beautiful. So you have to sit there and think, well, what are you doing this for? And how does this relate to the climate is changing as we've been told if you are changing the climate?
It's really a classic case of creating the problem so that they can create the solution. I mean, that at the end of the day, that's really what it is. But and again, I'm coming at you with two cliche sayings right now, but it is really also you play stupid games and you really win stupid prizes. I mean, truly,
Yes.
because that's exactly what's happening. And there is also this documentary. I'm sure you've probably seen it, but it's older. It's like almost 15 years old. What in the world are they spraying? And that was an eye opener for me as well because they did a segment in that documentary when they were at Mount Shasta and they were testing the. And I want to get into this a little bit. We will, but they were testing the soil, the weather, the water, like all of these things. And they were saying these hikers. This is 15 years ago, back in, gosh, I don't know, maybe 2000. I don't know, 9. I mean, I'm not really sure, but something around there. And these hikers were drinking the water at Mount Shasta, and the water was so contaminated from the spray. And so there's just so much even in that documentary. And these people were saying, there was one person who's sticks out in my mind. He goes, uh, at what point, he goes, we already know factually speaking that this is incredibly damaging to human health and human beings and the environment. What more do we need as a society to take this seriously? To actually sit down and go, you know what we've been sold is not the truth. And this is going to be a huge problem. It already is a huge problem in the coming years. This was whenever this was, 2008, 9, 10, whenever. I can't imagine now. I can't imagine now.
Well, and that's why a lot of people are suffering from like heavy metal buildup. They're like,
Yes.
I don't know why I have so many heavy metals in my body. I have all this barium, I have all this aluminum, I have all this cadmium, I have all these different heavy metals. I can't understand. I have all this iron, tons and tons of iron. You can go outside with a magnet, you can put it in your soil, you can see all that iron that's going on too. You got all that rust and decay building up in the body too. But you sit there and wonder and you go, well, why do I have all this buildup? Well, that stuff is coming down. And over here you can see it. It sits on top of the mountain. After it's a clear sky and this stuff comes down and whatever it may be, it's like a puff that just sits on top of the mountain, and then that obviously lands down on the people. But in that documentary that you were mentioning, what on earth are they spraying? They actually tested the water, and the aluminum levels I think were about 10,000 times what they were supposed to be. And the guy was going, "This is a big deal."
Yes.
Because aluminum can mess with the brain. It's linked to all these neurological issues. It works like an antenna on the body, so the body is more receptive to these the technologies and towers and things like that. But yeah, when it goes down into the soil, it messes up all the plants. That's kind of why I got into the whole topic of electroculture, because I started realizing we can reverse that with copper. Copper is the counter towards a lot of this stuff that goes up in the sky. But when you see these plants, you'll notice that the root systems are all blocked up on the bottom, but the top of the plant is all alive. It looks all green and beautiful, but the roots are all messed up. That's because as that stuff lands, like we were just talking about, it's building up in the roots and blocking up the root system of the plants. So if you think of it blocking up the root system of the plant, think of what it does to the body. It blocks up the meridian pathways, or the ability for things to detox and purge. And that's why salt can be very healing and pulling things out. And they're always demonizing salt and saying
Of
it's
course. Of
dangerous or
course.
whatever
Right.
else. Always the opposite. But when you start to see all these things, that documentary is another great one to understand how these things can impact us. The other thing, as we talked about, is that when you do this barrage and you make it cloudy in certain areas where it used to be sunny, people can start to develop that seasonal depressive disorder,
Mm-hmm.
SAD,
Yeah.
because now they're no longer getting those beautiful UV rays, which are very healing. And there's a great book by Jacob Liberman, Light as Medicine, and he talks about the benefits of UV. He talks about the benefits of sunshine. So when you're doing this too, you're also dimming the earth and dimming the consciousness of the earth. If you have all these crystal blue skies for a month straight, you're very powerful, you're very energetic, you're ready to go. But if you now make everybody cloudy and cold and winter and rain and everything, you're not going to want to do much anything. You hibernate. So this plays a role on many different things. And that's why I like to look at it from many different aspects of color spectrum, our brains, our consciousness. the ability to revolt, all of these different things are all in there.
It's funny, just a little side note before I throw more questions at you, but it's a really interesting timing that we're having this discussion this week of all weeks, because over the last like 7 days, I have been dealing with something that I knew I wasn't quote unquote, I say this sick, but there was something going on with me. I have been feeling very off, specifically in my lymphatic system on the right side. And I just intuitively am like, this is an overabundance of toxins. Like I can feel it, right? And we've had this really lot of spraying going on lately and all this stuff. And so just yesterday, I was not feeling well. I really wasn't feeling well. And I went outside and I had to be so careful. I mean, we talked about this off air. I had to be so careful with what I said on my Instagram because I've been in prison over there. But I said on my stories, I said my medicine for today is sitting in the sun, because the sun was out at that particular time and they were not really spraying a lot. I could tell that they were kind of spraying earlier, maybe the night before. And I just sat in the sun and I thought to myself, it's so sad that I can't even really share this on social media because it's not what they want people to know. But long story longer, I go to my holistic doc last night and he's like, let me muscle test you. Let's muscle test you, see what's going on. I already knew intuitively. He goes, Vanessa, you're like the majority of people that are coming in. He's in LA right now. They don't have quote unquote viruses. They don't have this. They have an overabundance of toxins in their body. And a lot of it is coming from the air. And I
Yeah.
was like, I know. I'm like, I know. And as soon as I, can kind of clear this a little bit, but it's just so interesting because I kind of already knew, there's probably been some later nights here and there through the holiday season and all that, but I was still taking care of myself. But this influx of stuff that they're dropping on us through the holiday season, for me to sit here and go, that's not affecting me, that's crazy, especially here in California where it's so heavy.
Well, and on that topic too, you have Elon Musk and T-Mobile testing
Oh,
out new frequencies.
oh
So you
yeah.
have a combination. When they manipulate these frequencies, then it also allows toxins to get into the bloodstream faster. That was the
Yeah.
whole 2020 thing, radiation poisoning, loss of smell, loss of taste, dizziness, loss of hair. Those are all symptoms of radiation poisoning because of the alterations. So if you have that, like you just said, there's a barrage of toxins coming down, then you test a new frequency, and those tests are actually taking place in California. They're also taking place in New York, taking place in Florida, Texas, all different spots. So you start to have that combination, and then people start to experience a symptom, maybe a cough, or they start having pain and aches and all these things because it's manipulating our Schumann resonance, our
Mm-hmm.
7.83 hertz of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just wild when you get into all of this because yeah, you start to look at all this and go, we don't need to do any of this. There's no reason for any of this. And then the other thing is, what benefits are we getting from any of this? Making it wintertime and making it cold, and whatever else in places, and like for example here where it was normally warm, what's that doing? I mean, other than just messing with nature. And aren't we supposed to be saving the planet? So how are we saving the planet while messing with the climate? It doesn't make a lot of sense because that's going to impact Mother Earth, and we're going to cause these imbalances. And then, like you just said with people, then people start to experience these issues too. And then it's all of these effects. And then will try to turn it into there's an outbreak all over the place, and now we got to start covering up and getting boy in the bubble again and all this stuff because you guys got to, you can't go out past 8 p.m. because, germs are going to get you at 8:01. But it's all gonna they try to do that, and so we have to be aware of the other side of the agenda while this nonsense goes on. So it's important to be aware of both
Oh
sides.
my gosh. I can't. I can't with the whole like you can eat outside, but in the tent. Like in the tented area, you can eat outside. I mean, that's more safe than eating inside the restaurant. And also you have to put on your mask. Oh my gosh, don't get me started. To walk to the bathroom because
Yeah,
that's the only time where the germs are going to jump on you.
only
Gosh.
at that time.
Only
They
at
only
that time.
they only
Yeah.
start jumping at
Right.
that
Right.
exact time, and
Yep.
then yes, outside, inside a tent that's outside the restaurant as you walk outside to inside. And you see that a lot of silly, a lot of silly things when you think about it.
It's so wild. It's so wild. So backing up to the to a little bit more like basic info really quick. I just want to be super clear for people in case that they're still kind of scratching their head. So when they are spraying these chemtrails in the air, what is the primary metals that they are spraying?
So you have aluminum, barium, you have cadmium, you have iron, and then you just have a whole plethora of other undisclosed chemicals. It's kind of like fragrance, they don't
Mm-hmm.
have to disclose everything. There's
Mm-hmm.
13,000 different chemicals in there. So same thing with this stuff going up in the air, a lot of different heavy metals. If you're pulling up a heavy metal test and you have tons of heavy metals in you, it can be from what's coming into the air, or it could be what's landed on the food,
Yes.
because that lands down on the food too, and all the farms and these things too. So that can cause a spike in these metals as well. But it's a lot of different stuff, and sometimes it's different stuff. Sometimes it's a clear, you'll see like a clear spray. You'll see these planes go out and it's clear. That's actually them lowering the UV. And then what will happen is then they'll come out with a heavier, dense spray. And then that's what will create the cloud formations. So you can see it's like clockwork. First it'll be all clear sprays and everything for like, let's say 2, 3 weeks. Then all of a sudden you'll see these heavier, dense, thicker straight lines that start turning into clouds in a storm. But it's a process, because what they're doing is they're manipulating everything going up there that's by the sun.
Yeah. Someone asked me on Instagram, are the people that are flying these planes aware of what's going on?
At this point, I mean, to be brutally honest, I don't think there's actually people flying those planes. I think that
I was gonna ask
some
that.
sort of yeah, it's some sort of AI or robotic system at this point. I don't personally think someone would volunteer to do this job, if they found out what they're doing, unless they believe that they're somehow saving the planet, which I don't know how that can work in their mind. But for when it comes to it, these planes come out like clockwork. I watch them, I film them all the time, and they come out like clockwork. They appear directly in front of the sun.
Yeah.
It's always directly in front of the sun. They also appear directly at sunset, and they appear directly at sunrise. All of these very healing full spectrum times. And the other weird one too is they also appear at the full moon. They come out and do little crisscrosses and kind of block out the energy of the full moon. So if you notice, even eclipses as well. But if you notice all of these times where that's the highest energy, these planes come out and they're trying to block all of that and lower that frequency. So, when it comes down to it, I don't think anybody is flying around in there. And when I was taking a flight to Houston, I remember I was on the airplane, I had the window open, and I saw this little tiny plane, and I'll never forget it. It was going like 3 times the speed of my flight from Phoenix to Houston, and it was just barraging the air. And it was a smaller one, but it was faster. So then I thought, well, then what's going on? How many different types of airplanes and how many different types of vessels are up there doing this stuff? And then if you are up at that altitude, and you have this, let's say, smaller plane, then you got to think like this could be impacting a person if they were flying all the time, because there's a lot of
Mm.
radiation up there too. You got a lot of that going on as well, all the EMF and everything. So I don't think personally human, I think more robotic or AI at this point. At least that's mine, because even with Instagram censoring, that's
Mm.
AI as well too. Those
Yeah.
are algorithms as well. So I kind of look at it the same thing.
I was going to say at least now, because back then, I'm sure when they were spraying in the past, there were people flying the planes. Actually, I saw somebody in a video. This is probably a couple of years ago. A pilot who came forth, and they were actually speaking about it on camera. I don't know where that person is or if they're even alive at this point, but sadly, he was somebody who was flying, and I would suspect though now it seems more logical that there would not be people flying, but that's kind of just crazy in itself if you think about that. I mean,
Well, and we can see what the technology can do nowadays with AI and robotics and all these different things. I mean,
yeah.
technology is much more advanced. We have had all this technology in 1901 and 1902, and I've shown a lot of books where we already had solar panels in 1908. So you didn't see solar panels till about 1980s. We had solar panels in 1908. So a lot of the technology that we have has been around for a very long time. A lot of things have just been hidden from us. And that's also part of this stuff that goes up in the air, is also to keep our energy low from discovering a lot of our past and seeing all of these things too, and understanding or connecting up with the stars and reading that and seeing that as a chart. because if you think of everything in the past, everybody used to look at the stars and they would see, okay, this is exactly the time that we're in based on the stars and the fractals and frequencies that are coming from the star. But, they would be able to determine that. Now, if you block all that out, people then are now on technology and have to depend on that instead. They're losing that natural instinct or connection to the earth to determine where, what point we're at. Kind of like when springtime comes and you're like, oh, I know it's spring. All the birds are chirping and everything else. So if you're manipulating all these things, then people start to get confused. And then, like we were talking about, they might start having issues that they never had because now their weather that they were used to having, that's, let's say, sunny and beautiful every day, is now cloudy and not the same. And then they're starting to go, wait a minute, this is weird. So we have to start piecing it together and look at this. And it's definitely an interesting one that's been going on for over about, I would say, 100 years.
Yeah. It just seems like it's elevated now. Like it's definitely in like this escalation mode where it's a lot more than it used to be. Because as you mentioned earlier, when we were kids, we didn't really see this stuff as much in these areas, even in heavy sprayed areas like California or in Arizona. We were looking at those beautiful big cumulus clouds and all that stuff. And now, what's even funnier, speaking of clouds, is that now they're actually like coming out with new clouds to teach everybody about. And it's like, no, people, these are not real clouds. These are not new real clouds. These are fake clouds.
I was just going to say they're trying to normalize it.
Yes.
The Weather Channel, and they're like, "Oh, this is Columbus, Nimbus, whatever," and it's like straight lines and waves. And when you look at those clouds and you see all those waves, that's a sound frequency that hit those clouds. That's why you get the ripple effect. So it's not the actual cloud as a different cloud. It's sound frequency, HARP. HARP technology beaming up towards. And when they placed out, just so people know, in 2020, when they were rolling out all those 25 million to 50 million cell phone towers, those act on altering the weather. The more you put those all over the place, now you have these little HARP stations and you can manipulate the weather in different places. Before, HARP used to be in Alaska and they would modify the weather in Canada and like basically make it 120 degrees in that one spot in Canada all the time. But now, because of this placement, they can now manipulate. But like you just said, the Weather Channel is going out of its way because it's bought by IBM. It says in the top right little corner over there, IBM company, like owned by IBM. But they actually go out of their way to try to make people believe that these are new clouds, and then try to teach the new generation that this is, climate change and you guys need to get rid of everything. You got to get rid of your cars and your fire and everything that you have, get rid of it all. So they're trying to push that. But the good news is of all of this is that I've seen a lot of pushback. I've seen a lot of people, and I've done some tests with solutions to clear this stuff out of the skies and also, doing a lot of detoxing to clean out the system. But there are lots of people who are realizing, this is definitely manipulated. And I see it with the younger generation too on TikTok. People realize, and that's why they want to ban TikTok and some of these social media platforms so badly, because the truth is coming out so fast on these topics. And now that everybody has a camera, everybody can see how, manipulated things are across the whole entire, realm. And that's kind of where I see it kind of moving from here.
Yeah, I like the fact that you said it's almost uncontrollable for them now because I feel like it's happening so fast. Like people are continuing to wake up and post and all of that. It's like we really do need to see the silver lining. But I feel like the powers that be behind the internet and social media, they probably weren't ready. They probably weren't ready for people because we really have taken what I think is sort of like this devilish thing, and we've sort of been able to use it to help create change, which has been really nice. I like the fact that you started speaking about HARP. For those people that are really unfamiliar with HARP, can you explain what HARP is?
So HARP is just think of an antenna, think of multiple antennas, think of like a television antenna, but like thousands of them, all implanted into the ground, sending up a sound frequency into the ionosphere to manipulate the weather and the climate as a whole. So what they do is it's a very powerful source of energy fired up into the ionosphere, which manipulates the ionosphere and can cause breakage and static and everything else. And then they can now manipulate the weather in different places. And this is kind of how HARP works, and they were doing a lot of testing up in Alaska, and they said that they dismantled it. They don't use it anymore. But this was also the military using it. They were using it to manipulate the weather. And this dates back to even when you go into Vietnam, when they were manipulating the weather to cause monsoons and try to flood people out, with those things as well. So, when you get into HARP, it's something that people should look into because this is another one that you can be aware of. But there's lots of different projects with these things. They're like all different devices and they use sound frequency. This is how they manipulate a hurricane too. They have all these little ground based antennas down on the ground and they fire a signal at that hurricane and they can manipulate the direction in which the hurricane can go. They can slow them down, they can speed them up, and we've seen a lot of anomalies where, like, for example, there was that hurricane in Florida where it just sat on top of Florida for like 4 days straight. And that's because they're manipulating the currents. Think of your weather currents and just you can go to Zoom Earth and look at it. Zoom Earth and look at the currents and all the different directions that they flow now. Everybody used to say like, oh, my wind would go east to west, all the time or whatever it may be. Now you got currents going all different directions and storms coming in, diagonals and things like that. That's what HARP is doing, and that's part of the military technology that's being used with this. And there's a book on it by Elena Freeland, which people can look into, all of her work. Elena Freeland has 3 books on here that all go into all of the things of what they are doing to our ionosphere and how they're weaponizing it and manipulating it and then causing a lot of the issues in which people are facing with these storms and floods and hurricanes and snowstorms and all different types of things.
Yeah, it's like it's coming. I think it's just it's so much bigger than we I think just think. Like we look at the tangible, right? Like, oh, look at the plane, right? Like look at the plane spraying the quote unquote clouds. But what we don't really realize is that there's this whole system and all of these pieces are working simultaneously to create some sort of conclusive, thing that they want to achieve. Uh, and yeah, I have to say that the more that we live, I think the more that we're going to see these weird anomalies, these things that are happening like Florida. And, I my heart still breaks. I think about them all the time. The stuff that happened in Hawaii. I cannot sit here and, just rationalize it up to, oh, well, it's just a freak thing. Like I don't think that that was just a freak thing and just intuitively. Um, Again, I don't know everything, but it just seems like with so much, with their hands in so many aspects of the weather, how can something like that just be totally natural?
Well, and on that topic, because I covered that topic a lot,
Yes.
that hurricane that was by Hawaii was 600 miles away from Hawaii when all of those things took place. That is the distance from North Carolina to Miami. So you have to ask how a hurricane that hits Miami impacts North Carolina at the same time. And that was a lot of manipulation of static fields. That's similar to what happened on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of weird things and a lot of weird anomalies happened on that time where cars were like stuck in buildings and people were actually stuck in buildings and all these different things. So when they're manipulating these static fields and they're manipulating the weather, a lot of other weird things happen with that. But yes, when you look into all of that, it was not what it seems, and a lot of the stuff is crazy when you get into it. And a lot of the stuff was all presented by the government before that. They put all these things in place and said that they wanted to take that land and turn it into like an AI smart city and all these different things. So you start to connect the dots and these things and you start to put those together. But yes, there's so many times in which when you see an event, whatever whether it may be related, just kind of ask yourself instinctively, because you'll know, does that feel natural? Or look up into the sky, look at the clouds, look at what's going on, look at how a cloud follows the sun, but the whole rest of the sky is blue at the same time. You have to just start looking at that and go, does any of that seem natural? And to take it a step further, you had in the 1980s, California had the worst smog ever. And they didn't know what to do. They were blaming it on the cars, and they were saying the cars were doing it, and it was the cars' fault. Then they blamed it on hairspray, I think they said, that was like a hole in the ozone layer and whatever else. That was the other one. But, it's interesting that there was a fellow named Trevor James Constable, and he worked with etheric weather engineering. And what he did was he built all these devices made out of cones, and he actually put them on a boat, and he worked for the US Navy, and he actually cleared up all the smog. He cleared up everything. Trevor James Constable was actually the solution to all the weather modification that was taking place in the 1980s. And he cleared it all up and he goes, look, we could have beautiful weather and beautiful skies if we just do these different things. His book is called Loom of the Future, and I
Mm.
highly recommend everybody look into that book. But he shows all his different devices which connect to Wilhelm Reich and the cloudbusters and all of the different devices which were used in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s to actually counter all of this stuff. So when people want to look into what can I do, because a lot of this can put us in this state of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? There are solutions. People can build things to actually fix things. The other thing too is people should stop using the weather app. And the reason I say that is because when you use the weather app, you're projecting your mind or you're into the ether of what the weather is going to be. Think about it all the time. You go, oh, tomorrow's going to be cloudy. Well, now if 1 million people say tomorrow is going to be cloudy, you actually create that reality. And if we tie it back to these planes, which are working on a frequency of seeing whatever the person is doing, of maybe, let's say, oh, 1 million people opened up the app and they saw that it's going to be cloudy. Tomorrow it's going to be cloudy.
Wow.
We have to think of it on a frequency spectrum too, of some parts that we don't pay attention to. And how about this? Let's take it one step further. You have stoves that have weather on it now. You're like cooking your food and it says like the forecast. Like,
Yeah, or refrigerators.
yeah,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Why? You're cooking. It
I
doesn't
know.
even make sense. Who cares what it is outside? It doesn't. But now that's broadcasting. And if they know, which they do, that we are antennas and we broadcast our reality and we create our reality and we manifest our reality, then if we put that out there, as soon as we see that, oh, tomorrow's going to be cloudy, well, it's going to be cloudy. And the system works like that. So think of this system as analyzing our data. That's what those social media platforms are doing too. That's why they're trying to censor and put us in prison for talking about the truth. But they understand that that's uplifting the frequency. So same thing with this. People can look into the work of Trevor James Constable and then Wilhelm Reich and all of their different types of technologies. And then you can dabble it into electroculture as well. But there's so much that also people can be doing. And it's about creating their mind into bringing positivity as well. Because when you move into a shifting of like, it's going to be winter and cloudy, it will be winter and cloudy. But then there's those days where you're like, man, if only it was sunny today. And then all of a sudden it's sunny, so you can see what we also have the power to do without realizing it because we think that our power is taken away.
Mm. This is a topic right here. And I just want to go out and say really quick that there's a lot of people, I would assume. I mean, I've done some shows specifically, actually I did an infopathy show not too long ago with imprinting water and PEMF and stuff like that with Anton from Infopathy. But I think that there are people that just hear something like that and go, that's insane. Like, that is so woo woo. That's so out there, new age. But here's what I want to say, and I think that you will absolutely confirm it, is that this is very science based. This, when we're talking about frequency, we're not talking about like woo woo, this and that and the other. We are living in frequency. Everything has a frequency. And I mean, if that wasn't true, then why would we be skeptical or nervous about EMFs? That's a frequency that maybe isn't so good for us. And so, um, if you want, or if you could, can you just speak a little bit more to just frequency in general and how it's actually not just some out there conspiracy thing that people discuss? That it is, there's so much basis to this.
So there's a great person. Her name is Sabrina Wallace, and she was talking about how people can tap into, with technology, they can tap into your aura, and how the aura was deemed woo-woo and pseudoscience and quackery,
Yeah.
all because when the Rockefellers took over the educational system, those terms became popular. Anybody who went against the truth, they would use those terms. They would call this pseudoscience and quackery and woo-woo and all of those things because in reality, we are connected to the ether.
Yeah.
The ether or the energy that's all around us, the ether was removed off of the periodic table in 1908. So after that time, it all became woo woo and quackery to talk about the ether or this energy that's the fifth element that's all around us. Perfect example. You walk into a room and you feel kind of odd, and all of a sudden your hair stands up and everything, and you get goosebumps. That's you picking up on the energy of the room and the energy that's all around you. It's not woo woo. It had just happened. It's physical.
Yep.
So, when we get into this, we have to kind of tap back into what we did as a kid. As a kid, you would pick up on something, you'd walk into a place and go, it kind of feels weird, or at different energies of places. But, when you get into water, like you were just saying, Dr. Emoto, when he was talking to water and saying, I love you to water, the water would structure itself and become a beautiful snowflake. When he would say bad words to the water, it would become almost like applesauce, almost kind of all compressed. So everything is energy. The book The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Fisterberg is a heavy one for people to go into,
Yeah.
but it goes into more about energy and frequency, and everything is light, everything is energy, and it's all around us. But we're not taught about these topics so that we remain in the dark, so that if these things are presented, we sound like conspiracy theorists, as they would tell us, and whatever. But it's like in reality, you really start to look at it, go, all of this has been around for a very long time. And like you said, there is science behind all that. It's just people are picking and choosing the science in which they want to use to tell you the narrative in which they want to tell you. Because it's
Amen.
much easier to keep people in fear and keep them controlled and keep them in this in scarcity mindset that everything is running out. And relating it to water too, because this whole weather nonsense is where they start to try to tell us we're running out of water. We're not getting any rainwater anymore. Now, here's where we take it a step further. We go to the book New Water for a Thirsty World, which talks about how we're never running out of water. Water is unlimited. We can also move to the primarywaterinstitute.org, which is actually based out of California, where they learned that there's unlimited water underneath our feet. That's why when Lake Elsinore was actually running dry, they hired dowsers who are using and picking up on the frequency or vibration of water to find water. And they refilled Lake Elsinore with unlimited water. That's why it's filled today. So, with all of this, you start to see, dowsing. That sounds woo woo or witchery. Why? Because it separates the person from the kingdom, it gives them independence. They're picking up on the oscillations of the earth or the oscillations of materials. And it's funny because big oil and big electric, they hire dowsers. So if all of this is pseudoscience and woo woo, why are the two largest companies or corporations in the world doing that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And then same the people who make all those little pills that they try to poison everybody with, they actually hire dowsers so they can find water unlimited to make their pills. And what most people don't know is they take that water, turn it to deionized water, which is water without the ionization, and it becomes toxic. So when you start to follow all the science and you start to go back and you see all these huge corporations are doing all of this, but me and you talking about these topics is a conspiracy.
Yep, yep. They're using the quote unquote conspiracies to control us and then telling us that those conspiracies don't exist, essentially.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's like, and the more you see it, the more you can't unsee it once you start. And it's not about, I say this all the time here and on Instagram. It's not about, and you are a perfect example of this, obsessing over it and freaking out about it and all that. It's not about that, because that's actually what they want. They want you in a state of fear. And that's not good either, but it's so important to be able to recognize, have the awareness, come to terms with the reality that what we've been taught is not what is, and then be able to turn it around, to flip it on its side, right? And be like, okay, what can we do? Like, what can we do? Because we are not given the spirit of fear. Okay. We have sound mind. We can make our own decisions. And what they're telling us, which is you don't have a lot of control and you're going to have less control in the future and you're going to be happy about it. That's not what we're going to do. That's not what we're going to do. We're not here for it. So before we kind of go into like more of the solutions based portion, is there anything else that you want to say about how, back to geoengineering and just chemtrails? Do you want to say anything else about how it's affecting human health, or how it's affecting anything, right? From soil, farm animals, wildlife. I mean, is there anything else that you want to touch on before we move?
So when you get into that, you can look into the heavy metal toxicity that we talked about, and maybe if someone's suffering or their animals are suffering, because little animals, they absorb all this stuff too. It's just like pesticides,
Yeah.
when they spray pesticides all over the place. But yeah, all of the kind of the things that we covered, you hit a little bit of everything in there, but there's just a lot that people need to dig into. And like you said, you don't have to remain in fear.
Mhm.
I've learned that the fear is just to control you. I mean, I went down so many rabbit holes of, lizards are going to eat us and all kinds of stuff and whatever else. That doesn't get you anywhere.
No.
It just drives you crazy. And we have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep creating solutions. And what I learned is the more we implement these things and the more we create awareness, the more that the truth will just keep coming out. And the thing is like you just said, they're doing so much to broadcast to try to do the opposite. But humans, we don't tolerate any of that. We actually do the opposite of what we're told, just like in school. So, that's what's going on. And I just see that happening more and more. And the more now that these topics get censored, the more people want to learn about them. Because now it's like, well, why are you censoring all of this information? Why are you censoring the opposite side so much?
Yeah.
Why can't we just see the opposite side and kind of make a judgment based on that? And
Yeah.
that's kind of what it happened with me. Back in 2015, 2016, I was in Chicago and there was this weird storm that came. It was a green sky. I've never seen Chicago have green sky before. And they had this storm called the derecho. And I was like, what is a derecho? I've never heard of derecho. I'm like, I've been looking at the weather for whatever. And all of a sudden, this huge storm comes in. It just like floods everything. And then it's crystal blue skies again. And I was like, so I looked at the radar and it was just this like, looked like a circle that just went through the city and then just disappeared. And I thought, that was the weirdest thing ever. I've never seen any of that. That day, I kind of started going into, looking into different topics and things. But I was like, that day kind of opened my eyes to go, this doesn't make any sense, and I've never seen something. And then what started to become was an occurrence of derechos in 2017, 2018, 2019. They're trying to normalize it. So this is a perfect example of all the stuff we're talking about where there's a weird anomaly, like you have hail in a place that you've never seen before, and then all of a sudden it starts to become an occurrence and they try to normalize it. So people need to look at events and things that occur, like a hurricane in California that has never happened before. And will there then be more hurricanes in California and they will deem it as climate change?
Right.
It's just things to kind of look at and just little pieces to kind of put together with the mind and just ask questions.
Yeah. It's funny that you just mentioned hail because about 2 weeks ago here in Southern California, we had a little bit of rain. It was, it was a day after a couple of days of fairly heavy spraying, and we had a little bit of rain, and it wasn't super cold. It wasn't super cold outside. It was, probably I would say in the 60s if I had to guess. Not warm, but not cold. And all of a sudden, I heard this sound, and my dogs started to freak out. And I look outside, and it is blasting hail, blasting hail. And I'm like, this does not make any sense at all. How in the world is it hailing? Doesn't it usually only hail when it's really cold outside here,
Yeah.
like in the 30s? And here we were, and I mean, it was legit. I had a whole entire blanket of hail in my backyard. This was like 2 weeks ago, right before Christmas time. And I just, those are the kind of instances where I just stood back. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, and I just go, that's interesting. Just interesting. I mean, look, I'm privy to this stuff already, but for those listening, I think it's just important to maybe just open your mind a little bit, like start to notice these really unique things that are going on. They're not coincidences. They're not just like, oh, okay, well, it happened. I'm just going to bury my head in the sand. No, I mean, it's really something to take note of. Again, not in a fear based way, but just in okay, I'm noticing it, I'm observing it type of a way.
Well, and like you just said with that too, is if you see that the city councils are funding this, but then if you give the city council money, then are they funding to continue to do this? Does that
Right.
make any sense that the money that's going towards the city council is actually doing? I thought it's supposed to help the people. So you sit there and go, doesn't seem too logical,
No.
and like you just said, that's a perfect example of things that just don't make any sense. And that's the best way to do it. Look at the skies, look at how you look at your land, look at where you are, and start asking questions. And then just kind of look at the weather and just kind of sit there and go, and then kind of look for how much they will advocate the word climate change. Because that's what they do. They push that word heavy, heavy. When the climate was warming, it was climate warming. Then there's climate cooling, and they've changed the term. Now it's just climate change because it was doing everything and they didn't know what to call it anymore. But that's another thing. That's another, it's ploys. And I've even shown this with light bulbs on the climate change thing. The oldest long-standing light bulb on the planet is an incandescent. It's actually in California. It's the Centennial light bulb. It's been burning for 110 years. It only uses 4 watts of energy. So why do we need LEDs, which are linked to blindness and radio frequencies and poisoning our home? It doesn't make any sense. We have already had the technology. So that's why I say there's so many, blocks or cuts in this narrative in which we're being pushed. Because when you look at it, we already had everything. And we also had electric vehicles in 1888. Why did they not come back till the 1990s? We had them back then. Rockefellers took over and they had to get rid of that. So you start to see all of this and you have to look at these things and go, if I look at the past, none of this future makes any sense. And we have to ask questions. And if we don't create awareness, we will keep repeating ourselves. And that's why my whole mission has been since 2020 is to not keep repeating, because there always are ways to fix things and we have to keep moving forward. Otherwise, we'll just keep going in the same perpetual loop and not understand how we got here.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. I think that people assume, I think there's a portion of the public that assumes that it's just easier to just put it out of their mind and to live status quo and go day to day to day. But I think the long term effect of that is going to be worse. Yes, it might take a little bit of a switch of the mind, or it might be hard on the, like we were talking about off air, a little bit hard on the ego even to like, kind of come to terms with some of the stuff that, we are faced with a lot when we start to wake up to the realities of the world, and that can hurt. It kind of shatters, like you said, it's like a bubble burst. It shatters the reality in which we've been living in, and sometimes that's a process to unwind and unravel. But I think the long-term benefit of coming to terms with it and then being able to really put in place some solutions to help, that's going to be so much better for us in the long run. It's not yes, of course, life is crazy, everyone's exhausted, everyone's tired, everyone's running ragged, there's so much stress, the news, blah 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 blah. I can see the whole, I just want to put my head in the sand. I'm over it, but where is I going to get you in 20, 30 years? Where's I going to get your kids in 20, 30, 40 years? I think that there has to be this balance, which we're going to get into right now. This balance of, okay, I'm going to just put all of the other stuff aside. I'm going to just face what I want to, let's come to terms with some realities, and then let's focus on some solutions, you know?
So with that, when we move into solutions, because there are solutions, you can detox your body, and there's a lot of things like we talked about with the weather engineering devices people can create. But first, getting into the body, because I think that's important. People can look into eating an all organic diet. I would say that's number one. You have the lowest amount of pesticides, you have the lowest amount of heavy metals, you have the most amount of nutrients. The last study done on organic was done on 1992, showing that organic foods yield 100 times more minerals than conventional foods. There hasn't been a study since, and I wonder why, when you look at that. But organic foods play a very big role that help heal me. There's a great documentary called GMOs Revealed. It's 22 hours long, and it has so much information about, GMOs and pesticides. But cleaning up your food is number one. Whatever you're bringing into your body is crucial. You want to bring the highest quality nutrients into your body. Next, you want to focus on cleaning up your water. Whatever water you have coming into your house, you can drill a primary water well if you want, and that goes about 650 feet below. That'll tap into the fresh, new water that's unlimited underneath our feet. Doesn't have any chemicals, doesn't have anything in there. Or you can get yourself a distiller or a reverse osmosis filter, and you can filter your water throughout your house. Because think of your body as 80% water. So whatever you put onto your skin or whatever that's coming into your home is absorbing into every pore and every piece of every molecule of water in your body. So filtering your water is very crucial. And like we talked about with the stuff that comes down, it can fall into the water. Here in Arizona, they have the canal. It's all open water, and all those things fall in there, and pesticides and everything else. And the water is just horrendous. You can smell it from a mile away. So, and it doesn't have to be that way either, because we don't need to be doing things like that. But water is another one. Next, I would say doing a lot of time connecting with nature, barefoot grounding, so you can restore your electrical charge. Sitting out in the sun is very crucial. Being connected to the nature, touching nature. Nature needs love too. You need to go out and touch trees and put your hands on them. We used to climb them as kids and be all part of nature. There's a balance there. That's why a lot of trees are also not doing well because nobody's spending any time with them. You think of like walnut trees and apple trees and things that are not doing so well. They're not getting any love. There's no energy exchange. We're always exchanging energy. Marcel Vogel showed all of this with the talking to plants and how we can actually communicate with plants. But he's a great one to go into. But then, so spending time in nature. Next, you can move into detoxing, pulling things out of your body. You can look at things like shilajit, which is high in fulvic acid to help pull things out of the body, also bring minerals back into the body. You can look into things like dragon's blood. We have on our website as well. It also cleans out the blood, gets the antioxidants back into the system to start repairing. You can look into things like bentonite clay and all different types of clays to pull things out of the body. You can look into baking soda and just sea salt and doing sea salt cleanses. You can look into enemas, doing organic enemas with organic coffee to cleanse out the intestinal line because you might have stuff sitting in there for 30 years that you didn't know that was still sitting there. That's another one too. And then the next ones you can do is, removing unwanted frequencies from your home. And this one doesn't even relate to the weather, but this also relates to allowing toxins to penetrate deeper into the body and cross the blood-brain barrier. So getting rid of Wi-Fi and hardwiring your devices and using a hardwire, like right now, I have just the Ethernet cord connected to my device and to any other things that I need to use just to get rid of the Wi-Fi, because that's pinging a frequency which is allowing toxins to get into the cells deeper. So it's one that's not really on there, but it should be done as well. Next, you can move into your lights. You can get rid of LED lights, move to incandescents and halogens, or even candles as well, so that you have more natural light spectrum, because light plays a big role. If you have all these blocked out, the blocked out sun, and you have all this blue light coming from all these LEDs and fluorescence, now you have no red, you have no purple, you have no orange, you have no yellow. So you start missing all those color spectrums, and then your health can decline just based on that too. So, light plays a big role. And then the last one I would say, that goes with just elevating your health to the fullest, is either growing your own food. So you know where your food is coming from and you're very connected to the energy that's coming from that. So you can have the highest source, or your clothes, making sure that they're natural fibers such as linen, such as wool, such as cashmere, hemp, all of those things. Because if you wear your clothes for 8 hours a day, there's a frequency coming off of that. And that's why the royals used to wear linen, because it didn't gather static and it was very healing for the cells. All the light that comes off of linen is very healing. And if we're missing light in the sky, your clothes can make up for it. So, there's a lot of things in which a person can do. And now, like I said, you can look into the work of Trevor James Constable and Wilhelm Reich as well. But, there's a lot of things people can do on their own to help elevate their health. Because, like I said, they're going to broadcast all kinds of craziness and whatever else. But in reality, I always just look outside at nature and go, it's absolutely beautiful, and the chipmunks are happy. They're never bothered at any of this. So we also have to have that mentality sometimes and go with nature and be a part of nature instead of just being consumed in the chaos, which is attempting to harness our energy all the time. When in reality, it's not as crazy as it seems. And even on a cloudy day, it's just a cloudy day.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned to see.
I love all those. I love all those. Few things to say is I think that it is so powerful. That last point, it's so powerful because I feel like there's so many people. I talk to them in DMs, who just feel defeated. Look at what they're doing to us. Look at what's happening. Like how I'm so over it. I want to move, but I don't know where to move because it seems like it's happening everywhere, and not just with chemtrails, but with a lot of things. And I think that the frequency that we carry is so important. And you look, I love social media because it can be so helpful, but it can also be super doom and gloom. And there is so much information about like the scary stuff that it can be so overwhelming and start to change the frequency that you're projecting because you're starting to get worried, you're starting to get scared. And so it sounds crazy and silly, but it's not. It's actually super effective if you just start to change your mindset a little bit. I think that is very helpful. I think that the point that you made about the hardwiring of devices, that's something that I'm having in my the conversation that I'm having in my household right now because we are not hardwired here. And there's a couple different reasons for that, but that's the plan. That's the plan long term. Hopefully sooner than later. There's a couple roadblocks. But I think that it can be so helpful because, again, it is playing into how we effectively can detox. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is what if there was someone that says, okay, well, yeah, you're telling me to eat organic food, but isn't the stuff being sprayed? Like, what about this? Isn't it falling? Like, all the stuff that's coming from the air, isn't it falling on the organic food too? What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of stuff happening with our food and everything else, but there are ways to also, to clean the food. You can use like baking soda, and you
Yeah.
can do different things and everything else to wipe things off. Be surprised. There's a
Yeah.
counter to everything. And I
Yes.
think that sometimes the organic route gets a bad rep because there's billions of dollars going against the natural way. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
So, as much as people go, well, if I don't change my health, then think of this. If you don't eat organic, you're not elevating your frequency. So then you remain in this lower frequency where what can I do? Because you didn't take the first step. So every step makes a difference. And that's why I tell people just take one step at a time
Yeah.
and start changing one thing at a time. Once you change that, you'll see how you feel, and then you can help change everybody else. But if we stay in this, mentality where we're helpless and we just can't do anything, and what should I do? That's what they want us to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what 2020 was. They wanted everybody to shut down their businesses and, like we said, not go out past 8 p.m. So when you look at that, you have to take a stand, and every one action makes a big difference. And the perfect example, which I will just go with, was when I got into electroculture, and it was just, a couple people talked about it and whatever else. Gardening at the one time was like, people growing their own food was like 100,000 searches per month in 2020. 2021, it moved to 200,000 searches per month. 2023, it moved to a million people searching per month. 2024, it'll probably be like 4 million per month. And it started with, I just talked about one video about electroculture and just trying it. People started doing it all across the world. It was nuts to watch this just absolutely grow. And it's just remarkable what one person can do. And it made me realize that just if one person does one thing, you can orchestrate all these other beautiful things to happen. But it starts with taking the first step, which was me just taking a piece of wood and copper and putting it in my moringa plant and saying, I'll just give it a shot, give it a shot. So we have to think of these things as the same step as, well, why don't I try organic for a month and see how I feel?
Yeah.
And then go from there. And then why don't I have my friends and family try that for a month and see how they feel? And then why don't I have, the whole school that I'm teaching for the classroom bring in organic food and just give them some snacks throughout the day and do something like that. See how much that changes. Because once you go, that's what I've realized. Once you go to this side, you don't want to go back to being poisoned anymore. And you don't want to lose your essence. You don't want to be controlled, and that's the part of where I learned all of this is creating independence. You're taking back your power, and you're taking back your independence so that you're not dependent on all the nonsense. You have your own food, you have your own water, and energy is really easy, but we won't talk about that today. Just, you have those two already. The third one is a really simple one to get to. Now you don't need anybody to tell you what to do for anything. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, it takes one step, and the biggest thing is taking that step. It's kind of like, pulling off the band-aid and just going and trying it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. That was really well explained. And, for those listening that are sitting there going, "Oh, well, I just, it's so hard today, and I have such a strict budget, and I have, children, and blah blah blah." I think, and I'm sure Matt would agree. You just do the best that you can with what you have in the season that you're in. That's all you can do, right? Because stressing about the fact that you couldn't buy 100% organic at the grocery store that day is going to be more toxic to you than the food that's not organic. So I think it's just doing what you can. If you can only do the dirty dozen or whatever it is, and you start there, and then maybe you can reprioritize some things in your life, or maybe you can, look at your budget, try to figure things out so that you can move towards a goal that you have. But it's not about stressing out about not being able to do everything. Small steps are still steps, and that's what he's saying. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to build anything, you have to start with the first block.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
just put it all together instantly. It takes some time. So that's why I
Exactly.
say just take it step by step. And
Yeah.
all the information in which is presented in this podcast, just go through, take your time, research it. You don't have to learn it all tomorrow, and just do it one step at a time. and that's how my journey's been, and it's still changing. It's always evolving. I'm like, oh, I thought I knew that, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that at all. So it's like, you just that's how it goes, and that's how learning is. And we should be thirsty to learn and really take in new information because that's what our mind's meant to do. It's not meant to go through the same monotonous thing over and over again. So, yeah, just like you said, one step at a time, whatever a person can do, and move from there. But that makes a monumental change because if one person, like I said, says something and 1,000 people do it, now 1,000 people tell everybody else. And this is where we are now in the truth movement of 2024 as of today.
Yep.
But that's where we are now because you have millions of people speaking the truth now versus it used to be one or two. That's how we create change as a whole.
Yeah, and it is happening. And I think that we should focus on that because it is really hard to get stuck in that sort of turbulent hurricane of nobody gets it, nobody understands, nobody sees it, everyone's naive. My family doesn't understand it, and I get it, right? Like I understand that cycle. I totally understand because sometimes it feels that way. But I think that there are more people that are starting to get it or get it to some degree or get it a lot than we think. I think that it is changing more than we assume, and they just don't want us to know that that is the case.
100%. I mean, I see it on social media every single day. I used to post something about related to this topic, and it would get a lot of, oh, why are you talking about that? That's fake, whatever else. Now you post about this topic, and it's a completely different story. And
Yeah.
people are like, well, yeah, this doesn't add up. Or even when I was talking about the moon, people are like, there is a lot of weird stuff happening with the moon that I see all across, all across the country. So, people are really starting to realize. And that's why, like I said, they're trying to put a lot of halts on social media and us communicating because so many people are like, I'm over it,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I can take care of my friends, my family, and my kids.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to keep seeing as we move forward into 2024.
Yeah, just don't stop, friends. Don't stop posting. Don't stop asking questions. That's what they want. They want, I mean, I'm not saying stay on social media or stay in technology 24 hours a day, but that's what they want. They want you to not know. And so it's just important. It's so important to, I think, just have a balance. I mean, yes, like we've been saying, find the info, create the awareness, create the steps, whatever steps you can, and then also just live your life. Like live your life. Like don't worry 100% of the time. I mean, it is frustrating. Trust me. This is me. Seriously, I have to say, out the door at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning with the two dogs. Step outside, look up. That's the first thing I do. When I see it, I literally have to stop trying to cuss like as I'm walking out the door because I'm just so irritated, right? I'm like, I want to punch the wall, as I'm moving out through to the street, and it drives me crazy because I'm seeing the stripes. But then I just reel it in, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Look, I can't do anything about it in this moment, but I am doing a lot in my life that can be productive, and help me through the stuff that I cannot control. It's just but it is hard and I understand it. Speaking of, this is just off the cuff really quick. I forgot to ask you this. Um, somebody asked me on Instagram, would it be helpful to just avoid the outside when you see the spraying happen? What would you say to that question?
This can be a psychological experiment at some
I
times. Like
know, I
imagine that these
know.
clouds didn't have any toxins in them at all, and it was just an illusion to mess with your
Mm,
mind.
mm,
I'm just saying that as just another side to look at it.
okay.
We want you to conform to staying inside.
Mm, mm,
So that's why I say that. So I think that it's important that to be outside.
yeah.
Nature heals everything. Like I've learned every book I've read, people just spend time in nature and they're fixed. Like it's just what it comes down to. So it seems like to me, not even like even today, right? It's a little cloudy. I still worked out outside. I still was outside. I did my breath work. I did all the things that I normally do with my workout. I mean, my day continues,
Yeah.
and if I was told to stay inside or control to that, then I would be putting more these fake clouds would be putting more control over me than I'm allowing control over myself, I guess, like allow the vice versa. So, when I look at it, it is what it is. I'm going to keep doing on my day. I'm going to keep focusing, like you said, on my house. I'm going to focus on my terrain, my land, whatever I can do, and I'm going to keep moving. And then I will keep figuring out different solutions, and that's what we'll do. But a lot of it can, yes, trying to contain you into staying indoors and like don't even go outside. But I don't think it's as extreme as that. If it
Mm.
was, we would, it's like the germ thing. We would be gone long ago, you know?
That's true. That's true. I like that answer a lot. I do because I think it can be disconcerting when you're outside and you're like, okay, I know this isn't good. I know that this stuff. I know these heavy metals. I don't even know how long it takes for them to fall. It's probably quite a while, but I know it's not good. But you know, again, there's like this temptation to get to that or to go towards the fear and be like, oh, maybe I should go inside. You know, like I actually have pulled my dogs inside before because it was so heavy. Um, for you know a few days there's been a couple days where I'm like, okay, let's come on in, you know, I'm not really sure about this, but like I don't want to live that way and I don't think others do either. So I really like that answer, and I think the power of the mind is powerful lack of better terminology. But
100%.
yeah, so okay, let's see. Is there anything else before we tie up here that you want to say? Just regard not just chemtrails or geoengineering or anything like that, but just anything in general that you would like to leave our friends with.
I mean, I would just say there's always solutions and to remove the fear, you know,
Yeah.
because the fear is being broadcast 24/7, 365, 99% of the day. You know,
Yeah.
even with the weather, like there's a reporter standing in front of a storm and pretending it's 120-mile-an-hour winds when in reality it's like 2-mile-an-hour winds and the guy walks behind it.
I saw
So,
that
you know,
video.
yeah, they're always broadcasting this nonsense, you know,
Yeah.
all the time. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt and do the best that you can and try to also then take care of your family, your friends, and your loved ones.
Yeah.
And, you know, with this information that you now have, you know, help educate others who want to learn. When it's their path and their time, they will want to learn these things. And it's continuing, it's happening more and more. But other than that, you know, I just take it as another day and they're just trying to get rid of our tan. That's kind of what it is. That's what it comes down to.
Well, I don't really have a tan for them to get rid of. I probably could use one, but you know, you've got a lot nicer of a tan than me. That's amazing. Well, first of all, before I thank you a thousand times, I know that, you know, you have so much information. I mean, truth, I've been following you probably for about 3 years. I've learned a lot from everything that you share. I'm mostly on Instagram, but I know that you're on other avenues as well. Oh, I have watched you on YouTube. But tell everybody where they can find you if they want to look into more resources, what you have to offer, etc. And we can put all of this in the show notes as well.
Of course, so they can find us on cultivateelevate.com. We have a website with a blog and a whole bunch of information on there. We also have a YouTube and Rumble channel on there, Cultivate Elevate, and a lot of the things that we talked about, that's all on there. And then an Instagram and Telegram channel. So Telegram is really nice because there's no censorship and I run the channel. So I don't have to worry about anything, you know, of censorship whatsoever. But I try to put my information everywhere because back in about 2020, 2021, I was deleted for showing all the ads on Instagram of them trying to tell everybody to take, you know, the poisons and put them in their arms and whatever. And I put together all the collages of all the advertisements, stacked it into a video. And DDT is good for me and all of those. That didn't go really well. It shared about 10,000 times in about the first 2 minutes, but then instantly they deleted the page. So after that day, I decided I'm going to be everywhere. You know, I'm going to try to put the information out there everywhere. And I hope that it can help resonate with somebody and I hope that it can help heal them. And because when I didn't have answers to my health ailments, you know, from the professionals that I talked to, I figured it out myself. And it's, you know, part of what I think we all need to do. We have to take care of our body, our temple, and just kind of, you know, look at it from a different angle. And that's kind of what this whole podcast has been about.
Yeah. Well, I literally just feel the exact same way, and I think that you don't have to question whether or not you've made a difference in people's lives, because just from an outsider, and now also speaking with you personally, but just from an outsider, I know that people have been changed by your work, everything that you've shared, by the supplements that you guys carry within Cultivate Elevate. There's no need to worry. You are definitely making a dent, and I am so grateful that you took the time and you wanted to come on and chat with me. This has been super fun. Seriously, I've been really looking forward to just chatting about this in general because it's such a topic of conversation, not just on social media, but also in my life. And so it's just been really, really fun. And I can't wait to share it. I just think it's going to have an impact, and hopefully, people will walk away from the conversation feeling more empowered and less afraid. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on.
Happy to be here and happy to talk about it.
Yeah, well, hopefully one day we'll have you back because I would love to talk about more things. They're so it's in like we were kind of getting into other stuff. It's like endless, right?
There's a billion topics.
There's
Yeah, a chatterbox, they would call
yeah,
me.
nothing wrong with that. Believe me, I'm you're talking to one also. But thank you again. Hopefully I'll see you back another time and yeah, just have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you for having me on.